As time passed, the town began to change in ways that no one could have imagined. The small acts of bravery, the stories shared on stage, and the quiet gatherings in homes started to build a new spirit. People were waking up from years of fear and silence. They were beginning to believe in something they had almost forgotten: real freedom. Amina and David continued their work. But now it was no longer just about them. The town had taken the play and made it its own. Groups of people from different neighborhoods started performing the play themselves. They told their own stories, adding their own voices. It became a living story, growing and changing with the people. Amina often watched these performances with tears in her eyes. She saw faces filled with hope, faces that had once been afraid. She remembered the early days when only a few came to see the play. Now, whole families came, young and old, rich and poor. They all wanted to be part of the story of freedom. David, too, felt a deep happiness. He'd come from far away, not knowing what to expect. Now he saw that art could truly change the world, could bring people together when nothing else could. He and Amina had created something bigger than themselves, a movement of stories and courage. One afternoon, Amina and David sat together in the town square. The sun was warm, and children played nearby. People passed by, greeting them with smiles and words of thanks. Amina said softly, "This is what freedom looks like." David nodded. Yes, it is freedom born from courage and stories. They knew the fight was not over. There were still challenges ahead. Some people in power still wanted to control and silence the town, but now the people were stronger. They had found their voices, their stories, and their courage, Amina thought, about how far they had come. From the first tense meeting to this moment of hope, she smiled and said, "You were right, David. Freedom and theater belong together." David laughed gently, "And you were right too. Freedom needs brave hearts." The town had learned a new way to fight, not just with anger or force, but with truth and creativity. They had found that real freedom comes when people tell their own stories and listen to others. When they stand together, even in the hardest times. In the years that followed, the play became famous beyond the town. People from other places came to see it. They wanted to learn how stories could bring hope and change. Amina and David traveled, teaching others how to use theater and courage to build freedom, but no matter where they went, they always remembered their town, the place where two very different people met and changed everything. They remembered the day she said, "We bring freedom," and he replied, "You bring theater." It was not a battle of words, but the beginning of a powerful friendship. Together, they had shown the world that freedom is not just about breaking chains. It is about awakening hearts. It is about telling stories that matter. It is about hope, courage, and the belief that even in the darkest times, light can shine. Their story became a message for all people who longed for freedom. It said that no matter how hard the fight, no matter how different the paths, when people come together with bravery and truth, they can build a better future. And so the town continued to live and grow, its people free in their hearts and minds. Because freedom was no longer just a dream. It was a story they told again and again, with courage, with art, and with love. Even though Amina and David's work was bringing hope and strength to the town, it also brought new dangers. The people in power were watching carefully, and they did not like what they saw. They wanted to keep control and stop anything that could inspire the people to demand change. Amina and David knew that their play and the growing movement were threats to those who wanted to keep the town under their control. One day, after a performance in a small neighborhood, Amina and David noticed strange faces in the crowd. In plain clothes, watched silently, not joining in or smiling like the others. These men were not from the town. They were agents sent to keep an eye on the activists. The next day, rumors started spreading that some of the people involved in the play were being questioned and warned to stop their work. Amina felt a deep worry in her heart. She knew that the risks were getting bigger. Some of her closest friends had already been taken away for speaking out. She wondered if her own time would come soon. David felt the same fear. As a foreigner, he worried that he might be forced to leave the country. But they both understood that fear could not stop them. They kept working, but now with more caution. They chose secret places to rehearse and perform. They asked trusted friends to help organize everything. The play became more than a show, it was a symbol of courage and resistance. Each performance was a small act of bravery. One night after a show, a group of armed men came to the place where the actors were packing their things. They shouted and pushed people around. Some of the actors were taken away, including David's closest friend. Amina tried to stay calm, but inside she was scared. She knew this was the price of standing up for freedom. Despite the threats and arrests, people in the town did not stop supporting Amina and David. Many came to the performances even when it was risky. The stories on stage gave them strength. To face the hard days, the play helped the town remember that their fight was not just for themselves, but for their children's future. Amina and David also faced moments of doubt. Sometimes they wondered if their work was enough. Was the play really making a difference? Was it worth risking so much? Some nights, Amina stayed awake, thinking about the friends she had lost and the danger ahead.
Ow.
David missed his family far away and wondered if he should leave, but every time doubt crept in. They found strength in each other and in the people they served. They heard stories of courage from the town, of mothers protecting their children, of young people helping each other, of neighbors sharing food and hope. These stories reminded them why they could not give up. Amina once told David, "We fight, not just with our voices, but with our hearts." David replied, "And with stories, we give those hearts a light to follow." Together, they kept the fire of hope alive. As the movement grew stronger, more people wanted to join. The play became a tool for education and healing. It helped people talk about their pain and dreams. Amina and David started workshops to teach others how to tell their own stories through theater and art. They believed that everyone's voice mattered. The town was changing slowly but surely. The people began to trust each other more. They shared their fears and hopes openly. The play had created a community, a family bound by a desire for freedom and peace. But danger still loomed. The authorities stepped up their efforts to stop the movement. They cut off supplies, spread false rumors, and tried to divide the people. Some friends betrayed the group out of fear. It was a hard time. Still, Amina and David refused to let fear control them. They believed that freedom was worth every sacrifice. They reminded the people that the darkest nights bring the brightest stars. They reminded them that even when the road is hard, hope can lead the way. One day, after a secret performance, Amina stood before the small crowd. Her voice was strong but calm. She said, "Our story is not finished. We will keep telling it until every voice is heard. Freedom is not far. It is inside each of us." The crowd cheered quietly, but their eyes shone with determination. David smiled and added, "And we will keep bringing our stories to the stage, where they can shine like light in the dark." The people knew he meant it. They believed in the power of their words and actions. The journey was dangerous, but it was also filled with moments of hope, love, and courage. Amina and David learned that the price of freedom was high, but the reward was worth it. Together, they showed the town that even in the hardest times, the human spirit can never be broken. After their first successful play, Amina and David knew they had something powerful. The people in the town were beginning to feel a new energy. The stories on stage made them see their struggles in a new way. It gave them courage and hope. Amina and David also knew they had to do more. The fight for freedom was not easy, and many dangers were still waiting. They decided to work even closer together. Amina helped by gathering more stories from people all over the town. She talked. Two mothers who worried about their children, two young men who dreamed of a better future, and two old people who remembered better times. Each story was full of pain, but also hope. David and his actors listened carefully. They wanted to make sure every story was told with respect and truth. The group started to create a bigger play. It was not just a simple performance anymore. It was becoming a movement. The play would travel from place to place, reaching people who had never seen theater before. Amina and David wanted the play to touch everyone, to bring freedom not only through protests, but also through the hearts of the people. They worked day and night. The rehearsals were hard. Sometimes actors forgot their lines because the stories were so emotional. Sometimes Amina and David argued about how to show the stories best. But they never gave up. They both knew that their work could change the town's future. On the day of the new play's first performance, the square was full. The air was thick with anticipation. People from all parts of the town came, some curious, some hopeful, some scared. As the play started, the audience was quiet. The actors spoke of the hardships people faced, the loss of homes, the fear of speaking out, the longing for peace. But the play also showed moments of kindness, of people helping each other, of dreams that refused to die. As the story unfolded, something beautiful happened. The audience began to see themselves in the play. They saw their own fears and hopes reflected on stage. Tears came to many eyes. Hands were held tightly. The play was no longer just a show. It was a shared experience that made the people feel united. Amina watched from the side, feeling proud but also nervous. She knew that their work was dangerous. The authorities did not like what they were doing. They saw the play as a challenge to their power. But Amina believed that stories could be stronger than fear. David felt the same way. He knew that art could open hearts when words alone could not. After the performance, the town was buzzing with talk. People discussed the stories they had seen. They talked about their own struggles and what freedom meant to them. Some said they wanted to join Amina in her efforts. Others said they felt stronger, like they were part of something bigger. Play became a way for the people to express their feelings safely. It gave them a voice when they were afraid to speak out loud. It helped them remember that they were not alone. This was the true power of their work. It built a community of hope, but the authorities were watching closely. They sent warnings to stop the performances. Some of Amina's friends were arrested. David's actors faced threats. The risks grew, and fear crept into the town. Some people wanted to give up, but Amina and David stood firm. They knew that their fight was not only for themselves, but for future generations. One night, after a performance, Amina and David sat together, tired but determined. They talked about the future and the challenges ahead. Amina said, "We cannot stop now. This play is more than a show. It is a message of freedom." David agreed. "Yes, and it is also a reminder that hope lives in stories." They decided to train others in the town to perform the play. This way the message could reach more places, even where David's group could not go. The people who learned the play became storytellers themselves, carried the spirit of freedom. From one neighborhood to another, the movement grew quietly but powerfully. The town was changing. People began to organize peaceful gatherings inspired by the stories they had seen. They sang songs, shared poems, and told their own stories. The town's spirit, once broken, was starting to heal. Amina and David realized that freedom was not just about fighting or telling stories alone. It was about bringing people together. It was about building a future where every voice could be heard. Their collaboration showed that courage and creativity could join to make a real difference. Through the dark times and the threats, they never forgot why they started. They fought for freedom with every play and every act of bravery. The town became a place where hope and courage lived side by side. After their first meeting, Amina and David kept thinking about each other. Their conversation had stayed in their minds like a song that does not stop playing. They both wanted freedom for the people of the town, but they had very different ideas. About how to get there, Amina believed in fighting with courage and action. David believed in changing hearts through stories and art. In the days that followed, they met again. Sometimes they argued loudly, and other times they just listened. Amina told David about the protests she helped organize. She talked about the risks they took, the long nights spent planning, and the fear they felt. She told him how freedom was not given, it had to be taken by brave people who stood up for their rights. "We cannot wait for things to change," she said. "We have to make it happen." David listened carefully. He understood the pain and hope in her words. Then he told her about the plays his group had performed in other countries. He explained how theater could bring people together, how it could make them feel strong and proud. When people see their own stories on stage, he said, they start to believe that change is possible. They begin to dream. At first, Amina was not sure she believed him. To her, freedom meant marching in the streets, making noise, and demanding justice. She thought theater was just entertainment, something nice but not useful, when real danger was around. David understood her doubts. He knew that art alone could not fix everything. But he also knew that without hope and belief, people would give up the fight. Slowly, they began to spend more time together. Amina invited David to visit some of the places where she worked. He saw tired faces, but also faces filled with determination. He met people who risked their lives to speak out. He felt the weight of their struggle, and he saw how scared they were to lose everything. David invited Amina to see one of his plays. It was a story about a family torn apart by war but still holding on to hope. The actors spoke in simple words, but their voices carried strong feelings. The audience laughed, cried, and cheered. After the play, Amina looked around and saw people talking to each other, sharing their own stories. Some told her the play had made them feel less alone. As the days passed, Amina started to believe that theater could help the people in a way she had not thought before. It was not only about shouting slogans or marching in the streets, it was also about healing hearts and giving people a reason to keep going. David saw that Amina's courage and strength made the fight for freedom real and urgent. Together, they began to imagine something new. What if they could bring the power of action and the power of theater together? What if the stories on stage could be about the real struggles the people faced? What if their words and plays could inspire others to be brave and hopeful? They decided. To try, Amina started gathering stories from the people she knew, stories of pain, loss, hope, and courage. David and his group listened carefully. They wrote a play based on these true stories, making sure to keep the honesty and power of the people's experiences. It was not easy. Sometimes the stories were too sad or too hard to hear, but they knew these stories needed to be told. Play was different from anything David's group had done before. It was not just a performance, it was a message. It was about the town, about the fight for freedom, about the people who lived there. Amina helped organize rehearsals in secret places, away from the eyes of those who wanted to stop them. Actors worked hard to bring the stories to life with respect and passion. When the day came to perform, the townspeople gathered quietly in the square. They knew this was important. The play began with simple words and grew into a story full of hope and courage. The audience watched closely, seeing their own lives reflected on stage. Some smiled, some cried, and some held hands with each other. The play was more than just entertainment. It was a way for the people to understand their own strength, reminded them that even in hard times, they were not alone. The story showed that freedom was not just about laws or leaders, but about the courage in each person's heart. After the play, many people came to thank Amina and David. They said the performance had given them new hope. Some who had been afraid to speak out felt brave enough to join the protests again. Others started talking about their own stories and dreams. The play had become a light in the dark, a sign that change was possible. Amina and David knew that their work was not done. They wanted the play to reach more people, to travel to different neighborhoods and towns. They wanted to keep telling stories that mattered, stories that could inspire real freedom. Together, they learned that action and art could work hand in hand. Their friendship grew stronger. They no longer saw each other as enemies, but as partners. Amina respected David's belief in the power of stories. David admired Amina's bravery and commitment. They found balance between hope and courage, between dreams and reality. But their new path was not without challenges. Some people in power were afraid of what the play could do. They warned Amina and David to stop. They said the theater was a threat to their control. Threats were made, and fears grew. Still, the people's support gave Amina and David strength to continue. The town was changing. The fight for freedom was growing louder, but it was also becoming deeper. It was no longer just protests in the streets. It was also conversations in homes, songs in the air, and stories on the stage. The people were waking up not just with anger, but with hope. Amina and David had started something bigger than themselves. They showed that freedom was not only in fighting, but also in telling the truth. And in telling that truth, they brought the town closer to a future where everyone could live freely and with dignity. In a small town filled with hopes and worries, two very different people met by chance. The town was quiet on most days, but underneath its calm surface, there were many struggles. People wanted to live freely, to be heard, and to have a better life, but freedom was not easy to find there. The government controlled much of what happened, and many voices were silenced. It was a place where courage was needed every day, just to stand up and say what you believed. The woman was one of those brave people. She had spent many years fighting for freedom. She worked quietly but strongly, speaking out for those who could not speak for themselves. Her name was Amina. She was in her early 30s, with strong eyes that showed her determination. Amina believed deeply in her cause. She believed that freedom was a right everyone deserved, and she was ready to risk everything for it. She had seen friends disappear for standing up, but still she never gave up. For her, freedom was not just a word. It was a way of life that had to be won by action and courage. One day, as she walked through the dusty streets, she heard music and laughter coming from the town square. It was unusual because most days were filled with quiet fear and silence. Curious, she went closer to see what was happening. There, in the middle of the square, was a group of people gathered around a small stage. On the stage, men and women were acting out a story. Their faces were painted, their voices loud and clear. The people in the crowd were watching with smiles, some even laughing. The man on the stage was a foreigner. He was an artist and a storyteller. His name was David. He came from far away with his theater group. David believed that stories and plays could change people's hearts. He believed that when people saw their own lives reflected on stage, they would start to hope and dream of a better future. To him, theater was not just entertainment. It was a way to bring people together and inspire them to act. When Amina approached, David noticed her serious face. After the play ended, she came up to him and said firmly, "We bring freedom." She meant that her people were working hard, risking their lives to fight for real freedom. David smiled gently and replied, "You bring theater." His words surprised her. She thought he was making fun of her cause. But he did not mean it in a bad way. He wanted to say that art and theater were important too. That sometimes stories could bring freedom in a different way. At first they did not understand each other. Amina thought that David's theater was just fun and games, not serious work. David thought that Amina's fight was too harsh and dangerous. They argued, each believing strongly in their own way. Amina said, "Freedom is about action. Must fight for it." David replied, "Freedom is also about hope. You must show people what it means to be free through stories." The townspeople watched these two strangers, wondering if they could find common ground. But despite their differences, something began to change. Amina saw how the play had brought smiles and laughter to people who rarely felt happy. She saw children clapping and old people wiping tears from their eyes. David saw how brave Amina was, how much she cared for her people, and how she risked her life every day. He realized that freedom was more than just stories. It needed courage and action that day. Under the setting sun, Amina and David sat together on a bench in the town square. They talked quietly, sharing their hopes and fears. Amina told David stories of protests, of people who had been hurt but still stood tall. David shared stories of plays he had done in other places, where theater had helped people find their voice. They both wanted the same thing, a free and happy town. But they saw different paths to get there. The town was watching them, curious to see what would happen next. Would these two strangers work together, or go their separate ways? The answer was not clear yet, but something had begun, a meeting of two worlds. One of action and one of art, both powerful in their own way. As night fell, the streets grew quiet again, but in the hearts of Amina and David, a new idea started to grow. Maybe, just maybe, freedom could come from both the brave actions of people and the powerful stories that touched their souls. They did not know what the future held, but for the first time, they felt hope. Not just hope for themselves, but hope for the whole town.